thank you so much for coming out. There are so many of you. It's great to see this thing growing.
Woo! Are there any seats available?
In the back. Okay, so we're gonna fly through this one. Talking about setting up practice spaces. First thing first, soundproofing. There's nothing you can hang on a wall to soundproof. Soundproofing comes from construction. You literally have to build a room within a room for soundproofing. And if you have your handy guide here from up front, it's basically mass and air. If you stack those together repeatedly, you'll ultimately end up getting some form of soundproofing. They're up front by the desk. You want to run back there?
Yeah. Your seat mic is still on 5. 15, 25. Make it 35.
Yeah, we might be running low with all the people here, but they can print out more if you need. So, mass and air, mass, air, mass, air. It makes it very difficult for sound to go through. So, on here, what people usually use is rigid fiberglass because it absorbs a lot of sound. And you can usually get those in panels that are like 2 feet by 4 feet, and then they're 2 or 4 inches thick, which is fun. It's fun stuff to play with. And a lot of studios will have that in their walls, behind their drywall, because that helps absorb it all, which is nice. So I kind of try to give you a small little diagram there: panel, air gap, panel, air gap. So one thing to know is that sound finds a way. Oh yeah, there's not a whole lot of pizza left. I mean, all you guys, the crowd, pizza can't stand up to those kind of numbers when this many people show up. Sound finds a way. It will always happen. So if there's a door or a window in your basement, if that's where you're practicing, or a garage or something like that, anything that isn't fully secure, sound will get out. It's just like Jurassic Park. Like, life finds a way, except it's about sound. Far fewer dinosaurs. I've had some success essentially making a door-sized frame out of drywall, and like doing multiple layers of drywall and putting that up against the door, because the mass of it just helps kind of deaden some of the leakage that might get out through the door. And you could do that for windows too. That makes a big difference. So thick, dense materials. And if you use drywall, you can actually get something called green glue, which helps absorb. If you glue 2 pieces of drywall together, when the sound hits the drywall, the green glue helps absorb and disperse the energy instead of allowing it to travel. It's pretty cool. It's very creative. So, really, the one thing that's worth trying to drive home is that there's nothing you can hang on a wall for soundproofing. All you can best to do is either tune. You can hope you can tune the room, or maybe kind of deaden what it sounds like inside of the room. You guys stealing pizza?
He is. He took like 6 slices.
Get out of here. So.
I asked.
Treatment materials, things that you can set up in a room. I suppose since it's this group, and I know a lot of you, some of you know Pete. I was a bass player in my old band and my current band. We're playing here August 22nd. Should be awesome. So he wanted to be able to record at full volume any time of day, any time of night. But he's also married and has kids. So he had just like a raw concrete basement, unfinished. So we soundproofed it. So basically, all of the wooden, framing that you put up, all the 2x4s have rubber. They're called U-boats that go around the 2x4s themselves, and then all of those 2x4s are hammered together, but the rubber helps with isolation as well as transference with heavy vibrations. So the floor is floated. All of the framing is, like I said, it's got the U-boats for the transference, and then he had very dense cotton insulation slammed into the in between the joists of the framing. And then what we did after that is he had basically rolls of vinyl. It's a 1/4 inch thick vinyl roll. Each roll was 200 pounds, very difficult to work with. But then you staple gun that to the joists, so that way it's very difficult for sound to kind of travel through all of these different layers. And then put up drywall, like in specific sound deadening drywall on top of that, green glue, another drywall layer on top of that, and now he has a relatively soundproof room, which is pretty insane. Now there's a lot more to it because that's specifically a studio, not just a jam spot. But that's what it takes to deaden sound, and it was a costly venture and a lot of time and effort. Also, one of the greatest moments of my life happened while assembling that. Staple gunning a 200-pound roll of vinyl to the ceiling is not what I would describe as easy. So we kind of had multiple people and a rig with a speaker stand that kind of like hold up some of it, and then my friend Ben and I were holding it up while Pete was staple gunning it to the ceiling. And obviously there's insulation and everything kind of floating around, and my friend Ben had this massive Peter Griffin-esque pirate beard, like huge beard, and we're wearing goggles and like little masks over our face, so that way we don't get insulation and everything. So we're holding it up, and he goes, "Oh God, no!" And he lets out the biggest sneeze I've ever heard in my entire life. It was the most disgusting thing I've ever heard. And he's just like, "Oh God!" And he pulled the mask away, and it looked like aliens. Like it was disgusting. He's like, "I think I need to shave my beard." So yeah, even though it was a lot of work to put that studio or the jam spot together, I look back on it fondly with moments like that. So anyways, treatment materials. First things first, the one that most people gravitate towards because it's cheap and they think it does stuff is foam. Foam really doesn't do anything. There are different grades of reflections, just like an EQ on your amp or your car, high end, mid range, and low end. Foam really tackles high end, usually referred to as flutter echo, and it doesn't really do a whole lot beyond that. And anything tackles flutter echo. So having all you guys in here are really killing the flutter echo. The couches over here, all of that makes a huge difference. Foam is not great because it doesn't have the density. All it can really do is redirect or absorb the high frequencies that anything can, effectively absorb. So when you see a good deal on foam, just know that it's really not a good deal. All you're really doing is deadening the high-end reflections. And, that has its place. It's not to say that it's totally useless. Just know that it has a very narrow scope of use. So Oralex is the main company that makes foam, and that's the only one worth buying from. There are foam knockoff companies that, gray foam looks like gray foam, but the knockoff companies, one, they're a lot lighter. They don't have the density, so they do even less than the good stuff. And then two, some of them aren't fire rated properly. So have fun with that. So blankets, you can get these, in my opinion, are more effective than foam. Thick packing blankets. A lot of times they're people will call them producer blankets or sound blankets. They're just essentially blankets for a moving truck, but they look nicer, and they usually have grommets in them so you can hang them. It's great. It's an easy way if your practice space is a little harsh when you're jamming. If cymbals are really beating you, like you leave and you have a lot of ringing in your ears, it's no harm in throwing up some sound blankets because they're like $20 to $30. Hang them on, and they cover behind a drum kit. It's great. I've been to a studio where the entire interior of the like primary tracking room was all done in blankets. It didn't sound good, but it didn't have any harsh high-end reflections either. So you know, decent deal. And I put the link on there because all of you guys can click this paper and go right to that link. So anyways, next up, rigid fiberglass. This is the goods. It's so valuable for how little it costs. So usually it's a broadband absorber. So I said earlier that the foam is kind of only treats high-end reflections. Rigid fiberglass treats high-end reflections and mid-range reflections, and depending on the thickness, it can get down and kind of kill some low-end bass rumble, which is nice. And realistically, low-end bass rumble, like a bass notes off of a bass guitar, like the waveform floats between 12 and 40 feet. So yeah, you know, anything you can do to help tame that makes your rehearsal space sound a little bit nicer. And I truly don't believe that it helps in the soundproofing, but it is absorbing some sound. So, you know, if you have enough traps up, it's entirely possible that you are reducing some of the leakage that's getting out. So I'm a big fan of this stuff, and the main, like the most popular brand is the Owens Corning 703. Sir?
I heard that if you have a low ceiling in your practice spot, does that also make bass worse?
Well, really, bass is awful no matter what. So anything that, you know, like if the room is small, bass is bad. If the room has short ceilings, bass is bad. If it's a square or even rectangle, bass is bad. So, you know, if there's an exceptional amount of corners, so floor to ceiling or, you know, wall to wall, all of that stuff is basically an area that the bass is going to hit, or all the frequencies will hit at one angle and then bounce off another wall, then bounce off another one, and it creates a buildup. Usually it starts to seem like there's an artificial amount of bass. So that's when you go over to the bass amp and you're like, oh man, this thing's really ringing tonight. You turn it down, like, oh, now it sounds good. So you go to the show and you're like, man, there's like no bass coming out of my bass amp. This sounds terrible. That's usually why. So having a tuned room allows you to kind of dial in the amps, therefore the band a little bit more effectively. Owens Corning 703, that's the goods. It's usually a 6 or 8 pack for about $100. And when I say pack, it's 6 or 8 of these. Essentially, they look like boards. Owens Corning's yellow, but it's 2 feet by 4 feet by 2 or 4 inches thick. And the thicker it is, the more effective it is. So that stuff goes a long way. But there are cheaper options. The Roxel Rock Board, you can order a 6 or 8 pack of that for like $40 shipped. And I have that in my jam spot, and it is terrific. It sounds great. You know, helps with the studio. The control room is an easy listen. It's fun. So usually what people do is they just make a wooden frame, throw the thing, you know, the rigid fiberglass in there. You don't have to cut it at all, and then just wrap it in some sort of breathable material, because the sound has to be able to go through it. So if you can breathe through it, it's a good sign that it'll work. So most popular is burlap, but you can just go into Joann's Fabrics and just walk around and breathe into all their fabrics awkwardly, and you'll get a good feel for what works. And probably arrested, but whatever. Ideally, the best way to do it is to hang everything off the wall instead of being completely flush on the wall, because again, that creates the air gap. So the sound would have to go through the panel, through the air, hit the wall, hit the air on the way back through the panel again. That's the most effective way, but it's a lot harder. It's, you know, you can easily drill some screws into a wall and hang a panel up, but keeping it off of the wall 2 or 4 inches is a little trickier. You need some sort of knowledge about tools and walls, which I have neither, sadly. So mine just hang flush. Corners are always the biggest offenders. Like I was saying with the bass, they just kind of bounce around. So what a lot of people do, and this is cheap and easy, I did this and it works great. You just order a couple packs of Roxel. You know, you cut them. You know, they're essentially into triangles. So, you know, like I said, it's 2 by 4. So if you cut them into 2 by 2s and then cut them from corner to corner, now you have a bunch of triangles, and you just stack them floor to ceiling. And and then just put some sort of cover on them. So for what I did is I just made a frame, like a long rectangular frame with just like, 1x1 wood, and then wrap that in burlap and just put it on as a face, because I didn't need to go crazy with it. Stack it floor to ceiling, put a face on it, done. Works great. Changed how I hear everything in my rooms. So if that didn't really help what you were trying to do, because realistically that's only starting to tune the room a little bit, and if you hear things better, you might not need to be as loud. So next up is decoupling and isolation. So getting things off the floor. If you're in a basement, get them off the floor anyways, because we're in an area that likes to flood. Even if your house is flood proof, it will flood. That's usually just like kind of what I like to live by, because every house I've lived in is flooded, except for this one. Okay, so risers. Make dense risers just out of wood, and it's usually beyond just like having a 4x6 piece of wood off the ground. Usually you have to assemble some 2x4s, and I've seen people stuff like blankets and things like that to kind of like kill any excess reverberation inside of the riser. But a drummer I used to jam with at his place, and this worked really well. He made a riser kind of look like this stage, but it's sat on hockey pucks, because it's reducing the amount of points that the riser is touching the ground. And then in theory, if the same theory about the framing, the rubber in between the 2x4s when building a studio, that sound wouldn't transfer through the floor as much because of the rubber. The rubber would help absorb it. So it does cut down the amount of kick drum that's getting out there. And kick drum's usually what the neighbor's going to hear first if you get a lot of noise complaints. So then after that, next heavy thing would be bass. So you just get the bass off the ground doing the same thing. Although Oralex makes a cool product called the Gramma, like Gramma, as opposed to Granima. But it's basically just like isolation riser for cabs. I've got a couple. I've got the regular Gramma for one cab, and then I've got the Great Gramma for my bass cab. And it works. I usually jam, and the wife is upstairs watching terrible reality television, and she's like, "What did you guys change tonight? The bass wasn't as brutal." I'm like, "Well, we got a Great Grandma," and she approved, noddingly approved, I should say. Supposedly cinder blocks can work just because of the density and mass that they have, but I've never tried it. So I don't know, but you can try it if you have a bunch of cinder blocks laying around, get your cab up. I know that some people make studio monitor speaker stands out of cinder blocks, because it's just so dense that the audio and vibrations just won't transfer the same. And there's the same reason why you see, like, if you go buy nice high-end speaker stands at a high-end audio store, the stands don't have just like a straight bottom. They're usually a piece of wood, and then they have, they're 4 pins, like literally like pins or nails that they're sitting on, because that's the smallest amount of surface area that's touching the floor, and it works. So we'll just keep breezing through this. Electric. If you have electric issues, first thing I would do, and we did this at my place, and it worked wonders. Any quad box, so any 4 outlet spot that you would have in your house or basement or garage or wherever you're jamming, put each one of those on its own circuit breaker. It keeps things isolated, so that way issues won't, like if there's an electrical issue, it won't take out a bunch of amps that are plugged into the same area. It also keeps noises to a minimum, so that way you're getting relatively clean power, as long as you're using, you buy a good breaker and you have a real electrician do it. Not, like I couldn't do it. I was fortunate enough to have an electrician living with me at the time, and having done it, like the process itself is easier than you'd think. In terms of pulling cable through pipes, it wasn't nearly as bad as I would have expected. and could be done relatively. It could be cost efficient if you have power issues in your house, and power issues can lead to blown transformers or tubes or fuses and things like that. So definitely something to consider. Also, don't plug power strips into power strips. That should be noted. But you can destroy an amp that way, or start a fire. It's actually, like when the fire department comes here, it's one of the things they check to make sure that everything that's plugged in is either plugged into an outlet or plugged into a power strip. But if there's a power strip plugged into a power strip, that's graded poorly. You have to change it. That's a fire risk. And then if you have bad power, and some houses just have, I swear, there's just bad power. You can get a power conditioner, like a rack system, but there's a big difference between getting just like a power strip or group of outlets in a rack form and an actual power conditioner. An actual power conditioner can grade the voltages coming through. Spanny, you've had probably 400 of them, and they're all good. They work well. They keep the power clean. And if you're in a band that plays festivals where there might be generators and things like that, all the clean power you can get. It's taking care of your equipment, but that's a whole other meeting. So, man, more people coming in, just incredible. Thank you guys so much for coming in. Just real quick, general comfort, heating and cooling. If you guys have ever had a rehearsal in a spot without good heating or cooling, you know how terrible it is. You leave the room, everyone smells like armpit or worse, and so it's important to ideally set up something. If you're playing a Cannibal Corpse cover band and you're super loud, obviously you can't just open a window, because you'll probably get a noise complaint or shot. I guess it depends on the neighborhood you live in, but it's important that you have good venting and cooling. On top of the obvious, just for your personal comfort, for your instrument's comfort, you don't want to create this unbelievably locked humidity or like super humid room, because that can start to mess with your guitar necks and things of that nature. Your drums, they're all just pieces of wood. So when they have very very warm humid days, and then no one jams for a week and it cools off, and it goes back. I mean, that's taxing on your instruments. And then same deal on the other end of things. This year we had negative 40 degrees. So if you have a jam spot that has poor cooling or insulation in the walls, it's not a good place to be rehearsing. So if you can put up insulation, either if you're jamming in a garage and you fill the walls with more insulation, or you get space heaters, things like that, goes a long way. But I always recommend trying to find some sort of relatively climate controlled area to jam in and store your stuff. Band setup and layout. This is always tough because it has to be practical for the space that you're in, but at the same time you want it to kind of accent how the band operates. So if I'm performing or rehearsing for a show, when possible, I like to line up and kind of set up like you would perform a show, because if you rely on looking at the drummer all of the time, then you go to the show and you're not looking at the drummer, it makes things kind of weird. So it's I always recommend rehearse whatever you would perform. So if you're a band that likes to hop on beat, or do the guitar toss or whatever it is that you're going to do, it's worth rehearsing, because it's don't try new things on stage if you can avoid them. So I like, there's the stage setup, but then for writing, I'm more apt to kind of try to set up in a U shape if possible, because then you have open lines of communication and everyone can kind of look, and you can give the nodding approval, yeah, that riff you played was good, do you remember it? And then the other guy can say, no, I totally forgot it already. It was just 10 seconds ago. How is that even possible? but that way you have the sight lines to be able to see him say, no, I don't remember how to play it. That's just for me. That's how I like to roll. Monitoring. Try to listen to your performances based off of, or your rehearsals based off of how you're going to perform. So if you have an in-ear rig and you're going to use the in-ear rig every time, just use it at rehearsal. Something that I found is that I have an in-ear system, but it's primarily based for my studio. And rehearsing like that and then going to play an event where we didn't have that setup totally changed my world in terms of what I was expecting and how I was prepared on stage. So, lesson learned, rehearse how you will perform. If you're not going to have monitors at a show, I'm not, maybe keep some monitors on during rehearsal, but be prepared to, know how it's going to feel when you don't have a group of monitors in front of your stage. But at the same time, you need to be able to hear. If you have monitors at your practice spot in your band with vocals, get the vocals up there so that way that's the most important part. Most sound guys are going to really try to get those vocals up high, if and when possible. But after that, most people don't have like an awesome area to rehearse. So it's usually a small, tight, cramped room that there's a bunch of amps and loud drums and cymbals and all that stuff, and then a PA system that's blaring vocals over the top of that. Protect your ears when you rehearse. Wear earplugs. And I've kind of stressed this a few different times at different events. The little foam ones, they'll do if that's all you've got, but they're not great because what they usually do is they cut some volume, but they kind of shave off the high end more than anything. The little Etymotic Research earplugs that kind of look, they usually have like a little plastic case, and they're good for $12. It's worth the investment. They have a fairly even, frequency cut where it's not just like all high end. They do pretty well. And then the best, Sensophonics, can't stress that enough. Getting molds made of your ear and then different filters that you can pop in and out. Not only are they most comfortable, but they also just sound the best. Absolutely incredible stuff. So, most of this thus far has been on the assumption that people are jamming in a basement or garage of some sort, because we're in the suburbs and we are fortunate enough to have that. You get a little further south, you're going to find that it's not the case. In Chicago, practice spaces are a luxury, at least for personal use. What you usually end up in is some sort of makeshift practice spot or worst case scenario. This is just like everything else has failed. You pay for one. It's awful. Everyone in the band starts to pony up some cash. So what are some other options? There are some bands that practice in storage lockers. I feel like I don't know how that has ever been successful. I know a handful of bands that have done it and they did it for a while. There's no way I'd risk it. For me, like, one, how are you going to get all the power? Maybe you're fortunate enough that there's a quad box in there, but even then, like, one quad box plugging in 2 half stacks, a pedal board, bass amp. I'd be frightened that you're going to destroy not only the circuit, but all your stuff too. So, not to mention there's going to be noise issues, because that's just like aluminum cans, like aluminum can boxes that you're hanging out in, unless you're in like a climate controlled one, but then you're indoors and probably the noise issue would be pretty noticeable pretty quick. So heating and cooling issues, back to what we were talking about before with the HVAC, and then security issues. People break into storage lockers. That's if you watch the news often enough or read a paper, I mean, it happens somewhat often, and the reason it's probably not more prevalent is because no one knows what's in all those boxes, and it's not worth going into every box trying to figure out what's going on. But if if a thief is cruising around a storage locker one night and sees lights and extension cables going across the parking lot and hears a band coming from one particular box, it's a pretty good indication that there's probably going to be some valuable music and gear in there that that can be stolen. So Thrice actually had that happen to him maybe 7-8 years ago, and it was pretty incredible how they did it. Someone saw Thrice storing their gear in there and rented the storage locker next to them and waited for Thrice to go out on tour, knowing that a bunch of their other gear would be in the storage locker. They cut down a good chunk of the wall and just walked in, moved all of the gear back, opened the storage locker, re-drywalled it, and walked out, and then closed it up. And there was, that was a nice storage locker with drywall. I suppose that's one of the rare cases where the thin, crappy aluminum storage locker would have been, a little easier, or a little more secure in the sense that they couldn't hide it as easily. Can't re-drywall an aluminum wall. So yeah, as the security, I just am shocked that people have had success with storage locker rehearsals. So fortunately in Chicago there are a ton of amazing rehearsal studios. Fort Knox is one, Superior Street, the Music Garage. And basically these are warehouses with a series of rooms that have been converted into just little lockable 24-hour access rooms that you just can leave your stuff in and go play securely. You don't have to worry about much. It's a pretty good deal. A lot of times these rooms are like $500 a month, but usually it's a couple bands in there, $50 a person. It's not terrible if you are in dire need of a rehearsal spot. And what's cool is a lot of them have other things that you can rent. Like Superior Street has like a stage that you could rent if you want to practice on a stage with some gear. I think Music Room has a back line, so like drums and bass and PA and stuff too. So that way you can just walk in and rent all that stuff, which is nice. It's a good option. Sometimes though you might have to haul your gear in and out, and the older I get, the less I want to do that. If I can avoid, or if I could just have my gear sit somewhere, I'll do that. So these lockable 24-hour access rooms aren't too bad. Issues, they're pricey. They're not local. There isn't a like a multi-band rehearsal facility in Lake County that I know of. There are a couple studios that will rent out their live room if they don't have any bands booked, but that's usually last minute-ish. Something cool is that, it's a melting pot of musicians. That's my favorite thing about going to a rehearsal studio. Like, you're just surrounded by your own kind and can just go talk to anyone. The guy at the Coke machine, probably a drummer of an awesome band, and even though he's a drummer, it's still cool to talk to him. So Superior Street has a pretty cool thing. They have 2 or 3 vending machines right in a row. One is just food and snacks, and the next one is strings and sticks and just all the accessories and things you might have forgot back at home when you get there. I've seen a bunch of guitar players and drummers just feeding their money and getting some strings. I think it's an awesome idea. I'd love to get that here, but it's expensive. So if you end up rehearsing with, or if you have to share your rehearsal spot with a band, protect your stuff. Maybe the other band that you're jamming, or the other band that's sharing the spot, but you don't know who they're bringing in. So many issues happen because of people sharing spots. Stuff gets stolen or used and broken or put away incorrectly and never found again. It's easy to create drama, unnecessary drama. So a few things that that I like to do when I've had to share practice spots. Security cameras, if you can, Obviously, there's ADT, which is like the big security company, and there's a handful of competitors with that. Most cable services offer it now. Comcast and AT&T, they have security systems, and what's cool is a lot of these places have like almost like webcam cameras. And since most of us have smartphones, you put up a camera in your rehearsal room, and you can check it from your phone, which is nice. Logitech makes a pack. It's like 6 cameras for $200, and same deal as long as the Wi-Fi is going, you can check. And then Monoprice, which is just a cheap technology website, has some options. Worst case scenario, you can get fake cameras that have you just put a battery in and it has an LED that goes off, but it looks like a security camera as far as anyone else knows. So that's cool. So if you can avoid sharing, or if you can't avoid sharing rehearsal spots, one, pack up anything that can be stolen. So if you have a pedal board, pack it up. You can bring it with you. If not, you can use like bike locks, just like the bike chains. Just wrap something up real tight, lock it up. I've locked my guitar cases. I've wrapped it up and then put it around the cab, like the handle of a cab. Just anything you can do to secure that people can't go through. Go through your stuff or take it, with ease. Lock boxes. If you have a pedal, if you're just using a few pedals, you can get a lock box and lock them in there, or like a gun safe type of thing. You can put some stuff in there. And then another one is I was rehearsing in a place where people used to use my amp and just absolutely destroyed it. Absolutely destroyed it. So I got it fixed, and then I started just taking my fuse out on the back and just taking it with me. And then, a couple weeks later, I got a call. Hey, man, your bass is not working. Like, yeah, I know. Yeah, well, we're kind of planning on using it tonight. I'm like, yeah, I know. Yeah, good luck. So taking the fuses out of your amp is a real simple solution, because most people aren't smart enough to figure out why the amp isn't working, and then they'll stop trying after a while. So a couple little things to improve your practice space. A whiteboard, like a dry erase board, so you can put up, this is how the song goes, or drummer, don't forget we have a gig Friday, and then you underline it. Don't forget. And then recording your practices. I think this is the most important thing you can do if you can. And fortunately, all of us have little recording studios in our pockets these days with our phones. It doesn't have to sound good; it just has to sound. Because I'm a pretty firm believer that you can't critique and judge the quality of your rehearsal while you're rehearsing. You should be focused on how you're playing. I mean, you might make a mental note like, oh, we're late on that hit, or that note was off, stuff like that. But overall, you can't judge the quality of your song or the overall mood of your performance. That's something you listen back to, and you have a completely different perspective on. So you can just put your iPhone on voice memo and try to find a way, somewhere in the practice spot where it sounds okay, doesn't distort too badly. You can get little plug-in mics for that sound decent. Then there are the little handheld recorders that are like the Zoom, H series. I think they're up to 4 now. And it works. You just put it up and records, and it sounds decent. And then a laptop or an interface or something like that works. Just to record, so you can listen back and just be like, wow, that was awful. Because otherwise you think you're awesome, and then you're taking that terrible sound out to other people, and you're subjecting them to your terrible sounds. So if you can at least listen back and be like, wow, that was terrible, nailed it, at least So, and then some space-saving things, like coat racks, you can get like at Ace for $6. Just have it's like a piece of wood with 4 little knobs that kind of hang out. Drill it into the wall. Cable storage. Just kind of hang them up. It's easy. It's cheap and fast and perfect. I've got those all over the place. I've seen people use they're usually for the garage. We get them at Home Depot, but it's just like a rack that you would essentially hang all your rakes and shovels on. and just lines them up. Perfect for mic stands. You know, mic stand, the base of the mic stand here is about the same as the average rake. You just clip them in, and it's good to go. Keep them off the floor when you're not jamming. It's perfect. It works great. And then, at my house, I have a couple amplifiers. So I was walking through IKEA one day, and I just walked past this shelf, and I'm like, wait a minute. And I walk back, and sure enough, like, it was perfect for amp heads and even a couple combos. I can, let's see here, you probably fit 6 amp heads, floor to ceiling. They're tall. So I bought a couple of them, and I wish I had a couple more, because they're perfect. You could put all your amps in there. I wouldn't necessarily run them in there, because IKEA isn't necessarily known for like the quality of their wood. No, like even if I don't even think it is wood, But as far as the shelf goes, it's decent enough. Drill it to the wall. It's pretty secure, and if you can have a couple amp heads on there, or pedals or whatever. I mean, it's just a easy way to store stuff, keep it off the ground, and just get it out of the way. So things like that go a long way. So anything to keep the clutter away and keep it somewhat organized, because we're musicians, so we're not organized by nature. So any little bit helps, at least for me. That's all I got. So if you guys have questions on rehearsal spots, lay it on me.
How do you deal with the pressures of speaking in front of such large amounts of people?
You know what? Playing a lot of shows over the years, you get used to it. I just imagine all of you in your underwear, except for you.
Who needs to imagine it?
Yeah,
Youth center.
yeah, it's a youth center. Take that down the street, buddy. Okay, question.
Are there like certain angles you want the amps to be facing in relative with one another?
No, I mean, that's a tough one. The original Marshall cabs, like let's say you're using 412 cabs. The original ones were 8 by 12, right? Because that would be tall enough to, while you're standing up playing, it would hit you in the ear, so you could actually hear it. And they were made for Pete Townsend, who plays in a band called The Who. And he kept losing his sound, or like his stage hands. They kept quitting, because who wants to carry an 812 cab around? So he called Jim Marshall and said, hey, can you cut this thing in half? I can still stack it up and hear it. But these guys keep quitting on me. So they did that. And then they realized that they could just put them side by side for these 412s. But the issue was that now it wasn't blasting in the ear. So instead of just making these these totally square rectangle boxes, they divided them into A and B cabs. The B cabs are just a square box, and the A actually, and I'm sure you've seen, I think Ross has one, it's straight on the bottom and then angles back. So that way it goes up towards the ear. As far as that goes, it's just whatever sounds best that allows you guys to still hear it. I know a lot of bands, if it's going to be too loud, they don't want to ruin the audience, so they'll just lay the cab back, like all the way on its back. It doesn't look great, but if that's what it takes to get the good sound, like it really depends on the room that you're playing in, and what the other band members need to hear. Because if you don't have 3 monitors at the front of the stage like we have here, and you have a guitar player over here that needs to hear you over here, you're going to have to aim it in a little bit. There's not a great option there. You just basically have to wing it, based on whatever gig you're playing. Any other questions?
What about for acoustic?
What about acoustics?
Because everything's been like really loud and electric. Like, what if it's like acoustic guitar aspect, but also, I don't know if it's going more towards recording versus necessarily.
I said for practicing in acoustics. I mean,
Well, yeah, I guess it's more of a recording question. I don't know if this is the right section.
No, that's fine. I'm here. As long as the crowd is cool with the question, I don't see why they wouldn't be. So I guess what exactly is your question about acoustics and recording?
I talk about it a little. All right, not much. I was just throwing
I was gonna say, like, there's a lot of different
mic angle.
yeah, mic angle could be, a lot of people, if you're just gonna use one mic, I start at the sound hole, maybe a few feet away, and just slowly but surely move it until I find the sweet spot that where it has the boom of the body and the ring of the neck, because of the strings vibrating on the neck, it's a big part of it. So that's just with one mic. A lot of times what people do with two mics is they'll have one aimed at the sound hole-ish and one aimed at the 12th fret. And that can help create a bit of a stereo image. If you're going for more of a roomy sound, you could sit further back, and then they'll use something, call it a mid-side or an MS technique, which basically is a stereo sound without having mics directly on your instrument. It would be a little bit further back, and it gets super technical, but it's basically using like a figure 8 microphone to pick up side sounds, and then one mic in the middle, essentially aimed at your instrument to pick up more of the direct pattern. Super nerdy, technical, fun stuff. But all of that is just playing around until you find the right sound. The biggest thing is having the acoustic performer stay in place, because that mic isn't going to move. So having the performer sit in one position for a while without moving too far, because it makes, you can hear right now, I'm moving maybe 6 inches, and you can hear, and this is just a crappy mic. You have a good mic that's really directional. If you move too much, you're gonna change the overall tone, and if it's just an acoustic guitar, the tone's all you got. So you want to make sure that you get that right. So no wheeled chairs. Make sure that you just stay in place and you are comfortable in that position. It's fun. Any other questions? One at a time, please. Cool. I think we're off the hook. So next month, third Tuesday of August, whatever that is, I think it's got to be I don't know off the top of my head. I thought I did, but I forgot. So we're good. I'll see you then. Wow. Hey, Jesus, thanks you. God. Good Lord. Yeah, I wish I bought enough pizza.